welcome to the Architecture of Rural Living, the podcast all about what it really takes to build a home in the countryside. I'm Rebecca Baxter, Managing Director of Studio 11 Architecture.
And I'm Chris Baxter, Creative Director, and together we run an architectural practice specialising in rural homes. Today, we're going to talk about sustainability.
Yes, and it's quite a relevant topic today. We are recording this podcast in the middle of the second heat wave of the year. We are both sat here melting. Chris has worn shorts for the occasion. And what's becoming more and more obvious is homes need to be able to cater for this, but also help to stop this happening or getting worse moving forward. Sustainability is something that is core in our practice. Every home we design really has sustainability at the heart of it, especially our homes in the countryside. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yes, definitely. I think climate change is real. Climate change is becoming more and more obvious. It's been with us for a fair while. And there are techniques and approaches that you can use and we use as a standard to most of our designs now that can help alleviate that. And it's an ongoing research and development type process with all of these things.
Absolutely. I think sustainability has lots of different limbs when it comes to benefits. There's an upfront cost to these things, but the cost of running your home moving forward is substantially better and substantially less.
And it's something that we've noticed clients starting to talk about us over the last sort of 3 to 5 years.
Definitely.
I think prior to them, when energy costs were much more manageable, then it was less of an issue. But now it's almost become a double-edged sword, whereby in some instances we have to deal with the sustainability elements in the first place. But on the flip side of that, there's a cost to it now, and the cost to those measures is starting to balance out now in terms of the cost of running the buildings. And I think clients are much more aware of that now.
100%. But also there's the good that it's doing for the planet, helping to help prevent climate change getting worse. But also looking a little bit deeper into that, our practice is starting to expand into how we improve those zero carbon homes. If zero carbon homes are our baseline, how do we improve that further? How do we look at making homes future proof in response to climate change, not just helping to prevent it, but responding to it? I think a lot of the talk around sort of eco homes and carbon neutral homes in the past has been about keeping it warm and making sure the heat stays in and it's effective to run and those sort of things. But actually, when you're faced with the second heat wave of the year, and we are only in June, people are starting to think, how do we keep our houses cool? How do we respond to that climate change? And that's something our practice is looking to evolve moving forward as well. And certainly in our latest designs, it's something we've looked to tackle. But for our listeners, this podcast is about rural homes, and sustainability is something that can help us get planning permission in the countryside.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a thread that runs all the way through the National Planning Policy Framework to deal with climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no doubt that the buildings that we have been designing for the last 50, 100 years no longer work for the climate in the way that the climate is moving forward. We have to embrace that, we have to understand that, and we have to start to involve those building techniques. And in essence, the NPPF positively, I would say, recognises that and seeks to reward people for doing that type of work and developing those types of solutions that would combat climate change.
Yeah, so we've spoken before in this podcast about how when it comes to planning officers looking at applications, they deploy something called the planning balance. It's all about weighing up the pros and the cons of that specific application. And sustainability is something that could gain you positive weight in that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are general principles to the NPPF as well. So paragraph 139 is one of those elements that we've talked about, I think. And there are ways and means that you can utilise that paragraph to assist your planning application. Again, it's about the planning system rewarding people for trying to deal with climate change.
Yes, so that specific quote in paragraph 139 is to help promote sustainability more generally.
Yes,
Or
so
positively, something around there.
innovation which helps to promote sustainability,
Yes.
helps raise the standards of design generally. Now, lots of people look at those things and they think, oh, that's about the aesthetic. Lots of people look at the paragraph 84E and think that it's purely about aesthetic. Now, I don't agree, and I've said numerous times now that the way the building is put together and the way that the building works is equally as important as the way that the building looks.
Absolutely. And I think that becomes more important when you talk about sustainability, because how a building looks isn't going to necessarily affect how it performs. And sustainability is more about the performance of a home than it is about the aesthetic.
So there are some elements that will be intertwined.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I think we take the view that the aesthetic should not be compromised by the sustainability measures that are introduced. What we try and do is we try and mould those and meld those together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but certainly there are techniques that you can use in terms of the fabric construction.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also techniques that you can use in terms of the overall design of the building, and they're called passive solar techniques.
Yeah.
And they are something that's not necessarily new. We've known and understood them for many years. You understand them better relating to the type of climate you are. So we have traditionally been quite a variable climate, but actually there's no real extremes here in the UK.
No. Unless you're
So
talking about today, in which case
yes,
everybody's melting.
yeah. So our buildings are generally designed to sit within a small envelope of not too cold winters, not too hot summers, rain, not too much drought, those sorts of things. And they've traditionally worked for us. That now is changing.
It's evolving, isn't it?
And the way that climate change is creating those issues for the UK is that we are having spikes in either negative temperatures or positive temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, more rainfall, less rainfall. So then suddenly we're into a position where actually we have to deal with lots of surface water runoff when we've got rainfall. But then at some points during the year we have a drought and we have a hosepipe ban, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So there are techniques that we can use in building design which would deal with all of those things. And the start of all of those processes are what we call passive solar design techniques. And that is to do with the orientation of the building, it's to do with glazed areas and certain elevations. And it's something that they've used around the world in differing circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
simply because in those countries, for instance, like Australia, parts of Australia will have very little rain throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Parts of Australia will be a little bit more like the UK, but generally warmer. And they've used those techniques to good effect, as they have in South America and things like that. So actually, what in my mind what's really happening is the sort of countries that you would expect between either side of the equator, between the tropics, are heavy rainfall, hot, humid types of countries. Actually, we're starting to borrow some of their techniques that they've used for years and years,
Mm-hmm.
because actually what's really happening is that our climate's becoming a little bit more like that.
Absolutely. I think traditionally in the UK, solar passive solar techniques and sort of that orientation of the building has been all about getting the solar gains, bringing in that heat, keeping it in the house, and making it warm so you don't have to have the heating on. So generally you'd be looking to face a building to the south, but also that helps with PV arrays on the roof. But it's all about bringing that heat into the house and keeping it warm. What is actually happening as a result of that we have started to tackle in our practice is those houses in the summer, because they're so airtight, they keep the heat in so well, because all of that lovely glazing over the views of the south are bringing in all of that heat. It can't escape the airtight building, and they're getting quite warm. And yes, we can close the windows. Yes, we can close the blinds and we can open them at night and we can purge. But that's not enough anymore, is it? And that's something we're looking to tackle.
Yeah. So traditionally, you're exactly right. So it was more orientated around heat and saving energy through um, retaining heat within the building.
Yeah.
Over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, that's evolved now into a system whereby, yes, actually it's retaining heat, and um, overheating is becoming more of a problem.
Absolutely.
So, excuse me. So a well-designed building actually will deal with both of those things in tandem. You you retain the heat in the winter when you can, and in the summer you do use the opposite of that to expel the heat, and they can be done using passive solar techniques. It can also be done using mechanical means.
Mhm.
I would suggest it needs to be a combination of many different things working together.
Yeah, because a lot of these things, if we're looking at mechanical solutions, yes, air conditioning exists, MVHR exists. They all use electricity or some form of energy
Hmm.
to run. So if we're looking at that zero carbon element, you are counteracting the effects of the the passive solar techniques with energy
Yeah, I mean, air conditioning is very energy hungry, and
massively.
equally, it contains lots of not very nice gases
Mhm.
that are not very hospitable to human beings, and ideally, we shouldn't really be using those.
Mhm.
So, for me, air conditioning is a last resort solution to a building.
Definitely.
Actually, what you should be doing is we should be looking at the orientation, we should be looking at the glazing, we should be looking at how we construct the elements of the buildings. So, for instance, lightweight buildings have a tendency to heat up very quickly and cool down very quickly.
Yeah.
What we want to do is we want to try and balance that out. So we want a more even temperature in the building through the day, and you usually do that using something called thermal mass.
Mhm.
Thermal mass has been used for years and years in hotter climates as a complete solution for construction. It's not, in my mind, a complete solution for construction. Actually,
No.
what we should be trying to do now, and what we're exploring as a practice now, is how we can look at combinations of lightweight, highly insulated, airtight envelopes within thermal mass introduced that help to balance out that heating um, demand within the building.
Yeah, definitely. So we're talking here alongside thermal mass, we're talking about that fabric first approach, looking at the materials that we use to construct the building and ensuring they help retain the heat, they are helping to regulate the building.
Yeah, and along with those materials is how we put those materials together. How do we detail certain elements? How do we detail certain junctions? And there's ways and means that um, we can thermally model those junctions and work out how effective they're going to be. And again, this is another part of what we're starting to do,
Yeah.
and what we started to understand about some of the zero carbon buildings that we've built in the past, and how they perform, and where's the real positives and where are the negatives, where are they falling down, and how do we introduce elements that will deal with those things.
Absolutely. Every house, our practice has designed every house, any practice design is a stepping stone. That we should always look to be making to improving them every single time, making them perform better, um, and what we can learn from that. Definitely. Just to go back on when you were saying about junctions, we know what that means, but maybe our listeners might not necessarily know what that means.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
should explain that that is generally the two where the corners of the building meet, where things within elements within the building meet.
Yeah. So most people, I think, now will be familiar with constructions of walls, roofs, floors, and their thermal performance, and
Yeah.
that's that's illustrated as a U value. We call it a U value,
Hmm.
and that is the difference between the temperature on the inside and the temperature on the outside, and how much that's lost through the structure.
Yeah.
That's fairly straightforward. Then beyond that, then becomes okay. Well, how do these elements meet, and how do those junctions deal with those U values? Because
Are we
suddenly,
losing the heat between those junctions? Are they well put together?
that's right.
Yeah.
So you can have a situation whereby um, you'd have a great U value in a wall and a great U value in the floor, but where they meet suddenly becomes a cold spot, because actually where they meet is the continuity of insulation and air
Hmm.
tightness and things like that doesn't quite work.
Hmm.
So what we do is we have something called non-repeating thermal bridging, and that sounds very fancy for effectively where two junctions meet.
Hmm.
Um, but where those two junctions meet, we can now model how they lose heat at that junction
Yeah.
or gain heat.
Hmm.
And as a practice, we are using that methodology then to help us throughout the building. So we will then go and look at every single junction where we can.
Hmm.
How can we eliminate that? How can we introduce little tiny elements that actually improve that significantly? Because if you're not careful, you have several issues with where building elements meet. You have the issue of heat loss, you have the issue of overheating the other direction, but you then have an issue around air movement and potential for mold and those sorts of things. And as buildings are getting more and more airtight, the potential for mold is much more significant.
Because where does that moisture escape?
Exactly, yeah. So you don't have enough air movement in the house if you don't. And that's to do with dew points and things like that at that junction.
Yeah. So we should explain. We are quite geeky about this. We know quite a lot about this because not only are you an architectural technologist, so you apply science to architecture, but also we are qualified SAP assessors. So we are looking at that, how a building performs
Yeah,
generally, assessing how that would happen.
yeah.
And
And I spent a long time on a training course to do thermal bridging detailing as well. So all of those things combined put us in a position where actually we can look at the building holistically, because that's how you
yes.
should always look at buildings.
Hmm.
But then we also don't have any little nasty surprises along the way either.
Definitely. So once we've figured out the materials and that fabric first approach, how we're going to ensure this building is a tight envelope, how those junctions are all going to work together. We then turn to the services inside the building. So, lights, heating, hot water, all of those can be sort of eco friendly elements of the home as well, can't they? They can all help towards that zero carbon goal.
They can, and that can vary according to how much you want to do of it, because obviously we recognise there's a capital cost to these
Definitely.
elements. Um, I think most of the buildings that we're doing now, we use a zero carbon base, and the zero
Mm-hmm.
carbon base is based on the theoretical process that the government came back up with back in 2016 when it expected all of our houses by now to be zero carbon.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wouldn't that be great?
it would be great, yeah, but it's still a long way off.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you don't have a building that performs in the fabric exceptionally well, you're always going to struggle to get your renewables to work, your solar water heating to work, those sorts of things. You've got to have a really well performing building in the first instance.
Definitely. It should never just be that these are tagged on and that it's claimed that these little tag ons
No.
are making this an energy efficient home.
So a standard building that's built to building regulations now with tag on sort of MVHR and a PV and solar water heating is going to have an effect,
Yeah.
but nothing remotely like it would do if it was a zero carbon house.
Yeah. It's never going to be
A
zero
zero
carbon.
carbon house is going to cost you virtually no money at all a year to run.
And you're never going to achieve a zero carbon home with just technology. You
No,
need you
you've
need
you've got
the
to do the
sort of,
fabric in the first
yeah,
instance. It's
they're the
part of the
basics.
criteria. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
So let's talk about these. We've sort of referred to them as tag-ons, but actually they are very, very helpful in and very efficient in their own right. So let's look at sort of hot water How can we make that zero carbon?
Okay. So most of the buildings that we work on, we have a combined system.
Hmm.
So that system will be normally a heat pump of some sort now. It'll be a combined heating and hot water system. Um, we don't usually use solar water heating. I've used it in the past. It's very good, um, but a lot of the buildings that we work on, there's no need to do that. Interestingly, we have started to look. We have designed a building that actually uses solar water heating throughout for both heating and hot water.
Yes.
And the heat pump, our preference is usually ground source. The reason we like ground source is because the Earth's temperature is much more consistent than the air temperature.
Hmm.
However, there are air source heat pumps now that will work quite nicely with those types of systems as well. What I would say is, if you're going to do all of that, because you're designing a heating and hot water system that's a very low temperature,
Hmm.
heat pumps ideally you want to be 35 degrees or less.
Hmm.
You really ought to then look at a ventilation system that's a heat recovery system. So, mechanical heat recovery system. Again, been around for years. Make sure you go for a really nice brand
Hmm.
because it makes a massive difference. And I would suggest to you that on most of our zero carbon houses, actually, it's the MVHR that's heating and cooling the house more than the heat pump. The heat pump's only ever going to come on when it's needed for hot water and for space heating. If you're designing a building that works so well that the MVHR probably for 9 out of 12 months of the year is running the heating and cooling, you're going to save yourself a significant amount of money. You're going to save a significant amount of carbon done.
Absolutely. You're onto a winner.
Yeah.
So, other services, your lights, they would be run on solar power from photovoltaics.
Yeah, so again, so to be zero carbon, you effectively have to generate electricity, and you have to send enough electricity back to the grid to create a negative number for the house. So you have
Hmm.
to supply all the electricity to the house and
And
then
then some.
send some back to the grid. Again, we are using solutions whereby we have batteries. The best solution for the house itself is always to generate as much as it can, store it in a battery, and then take it as and when needed. In doing so, you're then starting to look at your general electrical system. So your LED lighting, all of the obvious things that you would do now in terms of energy conservation.
Definitely. And we've touched a little bit there on heating. Generally, in a zero carbon home, we find underfloor heating is more cost effective, more efficient over time.
Yeah, I've never seen any real reason for some time now as to why, if you couldn't have underfloor heating at least on the ground floor, why you wouldn't do that.
Definitely. So, making sure all the services in your building are as energy efficient as possible, looking at ways you can generate your own electricity through PV, be it on your roof or in a rural home, you generally have more outdoor space where you could maybe even do a PV array. We do that quite often where you can have a dedicated part of the land away from your pretty garden just to um, dedicate to PV.
Yeah, and you get some real positives from that. So if you're designing a building and aesthetically you want it a certain look, then to go and whack a whole load of PV on a roof doesn't look that great. Traditionally, rural homes do have much bigger plots, so you do have the space to do it. And equally, what we tend to like to do is we'll have a PV array, but actually we'll have a PV array in a wildflower meadow or an area that's been upgraded for BNG or something like that. So you get some ecological benefits from that as well.
Definitely. So, moving on from those services, let's move on to water conservation. We've spoke a lot about the sun there. What about when it rains? What do we do?
So lots of local authorities now do have mechanisms within their local plans for reduction in um, water consumption. It's particularly prevalent in East Anglia. It's a water shortage area, and you can do numerous things. So on the simplest terms, you can add flow restrictors into taps and showers and things like that, and that literally stops you using more water than it will allow. You can use rainwater harvesting to supplement your water use. What I would say is that with those types of systems is be very careful where you're using that water, because I have experience of rainwater harvesting where if you don't get enough water movement within the tanks, you get a little bit of stagnant water, and then that's not very nice. So they say you can use it for flushing loos and washing machines and things like that. I would use it at the most for flushing loos. I think really in reality it's more for washing your car, irrigating the garden, those sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely. Watering the garden, making sure that lovely wildflower meadow you spoke of is getting the water in the height of summer that it needs.
Yeah.
Thinking, does this water need to be safe? Does it need to be treated, or could it be that it's rainwater
Yeah.
and using it
Or
accordingly?
or there's another option as well, which is grey water. So we don't tend to do too much with grey water because it becomes quite a complex system. But there's no real reason why you shouldn't be flushing loos with bath water or water from your shower or those sorts of things. So there are grey water systems out there that will allow you to do that.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know about that one. But moving on from the water you can't conserve, drainage and suds. One of your favourite subjects,
So
Mr.
so
Baxter.
so this is one of these ironies of now how the climate has changed in this country. So half the year we're saying, oh, we're trying to save water. The other half of the year we're trying to get rid of water really quickly,
Absolutely.
and that's the irony.
And there's that bit in the middle where it's really, really hot outside, the ground is solid, and all of a sudden there's a massive downpour and you're stuck with a lot of surface water. There's flash flooding happening around the country as we speak.
Yeah.
Um, Drainage is very important.
Yes. The government 5 or 6 years ago introduced SUDs into the planning system. SUDs being sustainable urban drainage systems. Don't know why they called it urban. I've no idea why they called it urban really. But it suggests that it's for cities and towns. Actually, it's for everything, and it's a mechanism effectively for slowing down water on sites, holding it on sites, and then disseminating that water to the relevant bits. So, if, for instance, you are in an area where you have sufficient land where you could send your surface water, your rainwater to a soakaway, and that works, that is top of the hierarchy. That's the best thing to do. So we send it to what used to be a pit in the ground. It's not anymore. It's usually crates with pea gravel around it or something like that. And then the water slowly percolates away and it goes into the ground. And then obviously that can then go into boreholes, which then go back into our water system that we drink.
Okay.
If you can't do that, then you've got to have what's called a positive drainage system. A positive drainage system is it goes somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So in our area, we have lots of internal drainage boards. We have lots of dikes and rivers and things like that. So we would seek to send that water to those areas. And the thought process behind that is that farmers will then extract that water from those drains to then irrigate their crops.
Makes sense.
But effectively, the dikes and the drains and the rivers are holding vessels.
Mm-hmm.
Before we do that, though, what we actually do is we hold it on site for a while. So if you'll see on big housing developments now, they have ponds and things like that. If you're doing a single dwelling, I mean, we've done a zero carbon house that has a pond in it,
Yeah.
part of that. We have looked at other solutions whereby we have open waterways within the plot, because ideally what you want to do is you want to have the opportunity for that water to evaporate. You want to have the opportunity for that water to percolate. And then finally, you want to have the opportunity for that water to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do two of those things, you've reduced the volume of that water straight away.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is we're trying to get that water back into the environment in a clean way.
Yes.
So we have started to look at those types of solutions, and we're looking at different ways of capturing rainwater. So rather than just having gutters and downpipes, we've done houses now where actually we have linear filter drains that take the water and then drop that into a pond and clean it and then dispose of it. And it's all about cleaning the water, and it's all about holding the water before it can then go on to somewhere else.
Absolutely. Which leads quite nicely into ecology. So we talk a lot about self-builds, and self-builds don't have to achieve what's called BNG, um, biodiversity net gain. However, we always say, why would you not want to do that? So to explain what BNG is, that is improving the environment, right? It's making the site better after construction
Correct.
than it
Yeah.
was before.
Yeah. So there's a figure that's banded around of 10% improvement. In reality, my understanding is that actually it's usually significantly more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're looking at self builds, because as you say, self builds are exempt from BNG, mainly due to the cost of obtaining reports and things like that. It can be several £1,000s.
Yes.
But we say, okay, well, we want to do that. We voluntarily want to do it. I think most of our clients want to do that. And we will look at hand-in-hand solutions with the SUDs. So providing semi-aquatic plants, providing environments for semi-aquatic species, insects, invertebrates, all of those sorts of things significantly improves the BNG on a site.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, they go hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, if you're building a zero carbon home, surely you care about the environment, and equally, you want the environment around your home to be beautiful. You want it to look natural. You want that wildflower meadow. You want the bugs to have a home to live in. Why not make a bug hotel or a bug wall? We've done that before, haven't we?
Yeah.
There's lots of ways of doing it. Even green roofs, sedum roofs, they provide BNG.
Yeah. So we are on a self-build journey ourselves.
We are.
And we talked this through with the kids, and the kids were so keen to have, insect hotels and bat boxes and bird boxes, and I mean, I personally would like an owl box if we can have an owl box, and wildflower meadows and all of those things. The kids see that, as do we, as a positive contribution to not only the environment, to life as well.
Yeah.
And if you can do that as part of the design process and make that an integral part of the building and the site that you've designed, then that's got to be an enormous positive.
Absolutely. I think as well, we're talking rural homes here. Generally, you're living in nature. At some point, you've got to embrace it, haven't you? There would be no point in having hard standing the whole way around your home when you're living in the countryside. It would be absurd, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, embracing it, making it beautiful, but in a way that is sustainable and helps all of the other things that live on this planet other than us humans.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we not want to do that?
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay. And again, all of those things help in that positive balance towards your planning permission, right?
Yeah. So it's we're dropping on little weights of positivity to look in the overall planning balance, which then all of those things filter from the NPPF and the NPPF's clear approach to trying to deal with climate change and trying to adapt to climate change.
So really what we're saying here is things that are sustainable, that help the running and performance of your home and help your home settle into the environment, enhance that sort of nature and the aesthetic of your home, all help to get planning permission.
Yeah.
So why would you not do it?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
It's something that we definitely encourage all of our clients to do. But like you say, most of our clients come willing and wanting to do this anyway as part of their journey.
We've never had a client that said, no, actually, I don't want to do any of this.
I don't want a wildflower meadow. I don't want to be able to harvest rainwater and water my garden with it and save on my water bills. All of those things help you, help the planet, and help you get planning permission.
Absolutely.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Sustainability for the win. Fabulous. Well, thank you for joining us on today's podcast. Thank you for listening to the Architecture of Rural Living. We'll see you next time.